Hi, folks, and welcome, everyone, to A Brighter Future. This is the program Climate Tech Innovation Fueled by Diverse Founders. I'm Elisa Miller-Out, Managing Partner at CLI Capital. So thrilled to be here. I first wanted to just take a quick moment to thank some of our partner organizations for this program. First, I'll mention We Cornell, or Women Entrepreneurs at Cornell, which is an early on-ramp program for women in engineering or research who want to explore entrepreneurship and learn how to commercialize some of the technology that they might be working on in a lab or an academic setting. Next program I'll shout out is BET, Black Entrepreneurs in Training, which also provides an educational space and network for Black students across Cornell who want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Each of these programs serves as an on-ramp into a whole set of other entrepreneurship opportunities across Cornell and across the upstate New York region, such as accelerators, incubators, and other competitions and programs. Finally, I'll mention Diversity in Climate Tech, which is a set of programs administered by Cornell's Center for Regional Economic Advancement in partnership with CLI Capital and supported by NYSERDA. And this programming provides support for women and BIPOC climate tech entrepreneurs at all stages, from early idea stage companies that take advantage of those programs like We Cornell and BET, all the way through to companies that are ready for investment and scale and that take advantage of the Rapid Accelerator program that CLI Capital offers. I will also mention that we have an upcoming info session if you'd like to learn more about the Diversity in Climate Tech program. That will be taking place on June 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and there will be a link in the chat for both getting access to that Diversity in Climate Tech program as well as the info session that's coming up. And with that, I will turn it over to the panel moderator, Lindsay Anderson. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Elisa, and welcome everyone again. As Elisa said, my name is Lindsay Anderson. I'm a professor at Cornell. I'm also the faculty director with Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability and the interim director of Cornell's Energy Systems Institute. I'm so excited to be here with you and to moderate this exciting group of panelists who are generously giving us their time and expertise for this conversation on fueling diversity in climate tech. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to set the stage for the conversation by syncing us up on what we mean by climate tech and talking about the importance of diversity as we pursue the solutions in this space. First, what is climate tech? There's lots of different, very specific definitions out there, and we take the broadest perspective. Climate tech includes any technologies that are designed or developed for the reduction of climate risk, specifically those technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which are the drivers of climate change. This includes transitioning our energy supply to renewables, eliminating emissions in the transportation sector, reducing impact of buildings and infrastructure, sustainable agriculture and land use, and also looking to decarbonize industrial processes. So basically everything that underpins, how our society works. Interestingly, while the rest of the economy suffered over this last year under the pandemic, climate tech was the exception. Year over year, climate tech indices saw returns of 100% or more. And this highlights this growing sense of urgency around climate change, especially in the traditionally marginalized and underserved communities where climate impacts are exacerbating healthcare and economic disparities. So this kind of brings us to the importance of diversity in the climate tech space. Climate change is a major societal problem, and societal problems can only be solved by engaging diverse perspectives and new ideas. From my own work, I see energy transitions as a good example of this. How do we decarbonize the energy system, focus on energy equity and justice, and make it happen fast? If only we knew. What I do know is that the best technical invention in the world will not solve this problem if it only works for or benefits a certain subset of society. So while diversity is important in every aspect of society, it's even more important as we consider solutions to our most critical issues that influence us all. We need all the voices at the table. But unfortunately, women and BIPOC entrepreneurs face more barriers in scaling their startups, including less access to and attention from investors. So today, we've put together this amazing panel of innovators to share their perspectives and their experiences as they are working, each and every one of them, to change this trend and diversify in climate tech. So just to set the agenda here, we can move on to the next slide. We're going to kick off the conversation with a quick introduction from each of our panelists, and then there'll be some time at the end for open Q&A from the audience. So you can ask your question. To ask questions, you can find the chat icon in the upper right corner of the screen. Apparently, if you're in full screen mode, you'll need to exit full screen in order to see the chat icon. If you want to direct a question to one of our panelists specifically, then please indicate that in the chat. A link to the recording of this webinar will be available right here on this page following the event. Okay, so let's get started with introductions. So each of you, I'm going to start with Erica and then go to Shalisa, Barry, and Crystal Callahan and Elisa Miller out in that order. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current role and your background and path to where you are at today? Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for having me. I really am excited to engage in this really important conversation. So I was recruited to work in government, to work at New York State's Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, as an entrepreneur. We were really sort of seeking to understand what are the real market barriers that NYSERDA can address to increase the likelihood or de-risk companies or increase the likelihood that they will get to scale and that we can decarbonize in New York. We can see greenhouse gas benefits at scale from those companies. And so that was a really interesting question that didn't have a clear answer, and I was excited to come work on it. Just by way of background, my undergraduate work was in mechanical engineering and technical leadership. I have an MBA from Cornell, so shout out to Johnson. I worked at GE for 10 years, most of that time in wind energy. I exited from 3 startups, 2 in ed tech and 1 in energy. And most recently been working to bring climate technologies to market equitably in New York. I'm really passionate that the energy transition is equitable, which is a really, sticky challenge, and excited to be working at NYSERDA as a market leader on such a thing. So yeah, thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Erica. Shalisa?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Lindsay and eCornell team for inviting me to this. I'm super excited to be here. My name, again, is Shalisa Barry, and I'm the founder and CEO of CLI Energy. I got into the energy industry, over 25 years ago. And yes, I was in elementary school when I got in. I was a mechanical engineer, and I got my MBA. So mechanical engineering, University of Pittsburgh. Just had to shout that out because, that is shout out. When I was in the field as an engineer, I knew I wanted to do something in energy. And it really, when I got to the crux of why, it was as a child, my family experienced energy poverty, and really what that is there were times where my family couldn't afford to pay the electric bill, so we were in the dark. And that just was not a great feeling for me, but I always remembered when the electric company would come back to reconnect and just how I felt, felt like I had life again, and, just dignity. I got my dignity back and things like that. And so when I was in college, I said, I'm going to go work for the electric company. So I did do that. Not realizing it was really tied to what happened as a kid where we didn't always have electric power. And so with CLI Energy, what we really do is we help businesses detect and eliminate energy waste. And I focus on repurposing that waste for good, and we call that KW for good. And so that's to optimize electric grid, and to improve energy performance in buildings. But most importantly to me is providing marginalized communities with equitable access to clean energy solutions. So people like me do not have to, be so concerned about being in the dark because they're in a certain socioeconomic status. And so I'm really passionate about really just making sure that I leave the world better than I found it. Thank you.
Thanks, Shalisa. Crystal?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm Crystal Callahan. The best way to describe me, I think, is I'm an entrepreneur that loves helping other entrepreneurs. After undergrad at University of Virginia, I got recruited to Silicon Valley. And that's just been a wild ride of working in major markets ever since then. So at this point, I've done Silicon Valley, I've done Los Angeles, I've done New York. You kind of bring a major market and I've sort of done it all. What has been the through line? Working at companies that I didn't feel comfortable in their environments. I felt like they had really toxic cultures. I didn't feel embraced by a lot of the companies that I worked for. So when I got a chance to create my own startup, I think I just kind of went for it. So I was a very early mover in the mobile app space. That is how I got on the radar of venture capitalists, probably about 7-8 years ago. And when I got to the table with venture capitalists, they were like, so women can do this stuff, huh? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, so people of color can do this stuff, huh? And I was like, yeah. So I think that was an important proof of concept that we are here. We're most certainly here. We're most certainly capable, but we have not been included and we have not been reflected in the broader venture capital landscape. So I have become the voice for that, become the poster child for it, and I love it. So I have a New York City office, but I work with entrepreneurs around the globe, and my family came to upstate New York, Buffalo, New York in the 1940s, and they absolutely settled in upstate New York and refused to go anywhere else. I invite them to visit me for a few days, and they say, this is so lovely, but I have to go back home to upstate New York. So my heart is always going to be in upstate New York. Anytime I get a chance to contribute to the development and growth of upstate, I'm here for it. I got a wonderful opportunity last summer to be invited to work with Launch New York. Launch New York, for those of you who don't know, is focused on the 27 counties of upstate and Western New York. We're doing some wonderful work that I'm very proud of. The focus is absolutely social impact. It's absolutely diversity and inclusion. It's absolutely eco-tech. And so I'm just really pleased to be here, to be a face and a voice for the movement with all these wonderful, capable, talented, accomplished, powerful women.
Thanks, Crystal. Elisa?
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I'm Elisa Miller-Out, managing partner at CLI Capital. Some other of the main hats I wear include as an innovation advisor at NYSERDA, and I'm also an entrepreneur in residence at Cornell University. I spent a lot of my career as a tech entrepreneur in both the software services as well as software product space. And during that time, I did a lot of mentoring of other entrepreneurs in the space and working with lots of startups. That's how I started getting involved in the climate tech space as well, is through several climate tech mentoring programs through both Cornell and NYSERDA, Launch New York, and several other amazing organizations across the upstate New York region. During that time, I also saw, though, firsthand how many women and BIPOC founders were being overlooked and untapped. To Crystal's point, we're only receiving about 2% of venture capital funding and less than 0.1% for women of color. Seeing this firsthand made me both outraged, but also really inspired to make a difference. And I've devoted the next phase in my career to really focusing firsthand on this problem by founding CLI Capital alongside my amazing partners, Nico Ramirez, Catherine Cartini, Erica O'Brien. And through that process, we founded CLI Capital, which is a movement-driven venture capital firm focused on investing with a gender and diversity lens. We are solving for diversity, equity, and inclusion first, because it matters, to Lindsay's point earlier about who's at the table driving innovation. And then beyond that, we look at how can we solve the big problems that all of us face as humanity, but how can we do it with these diverse voices at the table? And those problems include climate, education, health. Some of those big areas are all things that we look at CLI Capital and look at how can we solve these with diverse founders lending a very unique perspective to these problems, understanding these problems in different ways, and coming up with brilliant new solutions that ultimately create better businesses, a better world for all of us, and better returns for investors as well. There's no trade-off there, which is the other beautiful part of all this. Very excited to be on the panel, and I'll turn it back to Lindsay. Thanks.
Thank you, Elisa. Thanks to all of you for those great introductions. So our second question sort of follows on to this. So you gave us a little taste of your experiences of how you got here. And so what I'm hoping is if a couple of you could go a little deeper into your personal experience as women entrepreneurs and innovators, or and as people of color now working in climate tech. Could you go a little bit deeper, starting with Erika, into what your personal experiences have been in your career?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit about, how much should we share this moment. It has been, there have been points in my career where it's, the Wild West. Since I've been at NYSERDA, I've worked for 2 female CEOs, and it's been such, it's so refreshing actually working for a humane, in a humane environment. Both of them, both Alicia Barton and Doreen Harris, are moms. And gosh, that has been such an amazing perspective over the last year, trying to sort of navigate momming and working on important, work during a pandemic. And so, that has been certainly contrasted with some of my experiences before working at NYSERDA. I worked as an engineer for a long time, and many times I was the only woman at the table, and same thing, working in venture capital, often the only woman at the table. It can be exhausting to be tokenized. And I, as a white woman, I'm not even really subjected to the same, prejudice and discrimination and awful just behavior of my, colleagues in Black and brown communities. And so it's just, that being said, I mean, I'll share a short personal story. I mean, when I was raising money for one of my startups, I mean, there are absolutely no rules on what people can ask of you and say to you. It's not protected like it would be in a job interview. And so, I would be pitching and questions about the business, but then questions would pivot to me. I'd be wearing a wedding ring. And so people would ask me if I was going to have children. And so I stopped wearing a wedding ring. And then people would ask me if I was going to get married and what were my family plans. And the questions got worse from there. And so it's that being said, in my career, in the, I'm sorry to say it, but almost 20 years of my career, really things are changing. I think there's more work to do, plenty more work to do on so many fronts. And, some of that work I'm proud to be engaged in and supporting. And, that being said, I do think it's easier than when I started, and, but holding the whole industry to a higher standard is something that I think that the women on this panel are all working toward.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Like Erika, I've had really an interesting journey, just starting as a STEM professional. So when I started working at the utilities, I remember just in the beginning, they say, okay, you have to get matched up with a mentor. And so it was up to each individual employee to go and find a mentor. Well, all of my colleagues found a mentor, and everyone I asked, they either didn't respond to me or they declined. And I tell folks that story because biases are real, but it's not like, I don't look at it from a standpoint that people are trying to be intentionally hurtful or whatever. We like to be around the people that reflect who we are. And in order for us to make a change, like in even the energy and climate tech space, we got to be more conscious of that, because I don't think those individuals recognize that I was the only one left out and all of my white colleagues ended up with mentors. And so my career early on, I had to pave the way for myself. I had to figure it out because I had no one to talk to and bounce things off the wall. I would, reach out to one of my professors at the university, throughout my career, just kind of sharing stories and trying to get advice from him. But that was like the only thing I had. I had no one within the energy profession to really mentor me. And then when I started CLI Energy 5 years ago, I had some very interesting conversations with folks that said they wanted to be supportive. So I was in an incubator in Florida, and they brought in some advisors. And the one gentleman, he says, wow, this is such a great idea. Who came up with it? And I shared, I did. He says, no. Who gave you the idea? Like, basically, no, you couldn't have come up. And I says, no, I did. He says, well, this is too big for you. You can't solve it. He says, so who are you going to give this to solve? And I said, well, that's what startups do. They come up with these ideas, and maybe they seem like big, but that's how businesses get started. So it's my idea. So then he wanted to be one of my advisors. And I'm like, there's no way. A guy that totally didn't believe in me and the fact that this was my idea and that I came up with it. And so a lot of those kind of stories happen. I remember when I got accepted into the Morgan Stanley Accelerator, which was the Multicultural Innovation Accelerator, which took me out of Florida up to New York. And 2018, so I bootstrapped for a little over 2.5 years, the company. And I had to put over like $300,000 of my own money into it because I didn't get people that really believed that I could do this, because I guess I'm a Black female in an energy field. It's like, that's just, those things don't add up. It's like, that's not what the energy climate tech looks like. It's white male dominated. So it was really difficult to raise capital. And then once I got into the Morgan Stanley Accelerator, that's when I realized I needed to participate in different programs to get support. And that kind of opened me up into like this whole new world that I wasn't even aware of. And I say this for especially for BIPOC founders. A lot of us don't even know about the whole venture capital piece, and I didn't. When I came up to Morgan Stanley, they just saw something in my company and they invested. And that opened up this world of venture capital to me that I didn't even know about. So within 45 days of me saying I was raising my pre-seed round, I got a term sheet for the full round for $2 million. And the gentlemen, they were from my hometown. I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I was like, wow, this is going to be a cool story. Like Bethlehem, investor invest in this young lady that started, and it came from this marginalized community. So I thought it was like a great story. And then when they sent the term sheet, I guess they didn't think I understood what all the terms meant. And so basically they were trying to take over my company. And they said, we want you to focus on, just the business, and we're going to do all the operations and financial piece. And basically, if you look at the terms, they were egregious terms. It was crazy. Morgan Stanley said, well, maybe, Shalisas, you're looking at it wrong. So they let their attorneys, and they looked at it. My attorneys looked at it. And it's like, no, it's not wrong. And they were like, are they crazy? Do they think you don't know what this is? And so Morgan Stanley set up a meeting with those investors to just maybe level set, because maybe they thought maybe they didn't understand something. And at the end of that meeting, they were like, no. These folks, I guess, was really kind of trying to take advantage of a situation because they felt this opportunity was great. So out the gate, I did get opportunities to be invested in, but they weren't great opportunities, so I turned them down. And, so that's been like a part of the journey as a Black female founder. It literally hasn't been easy. People say, like, why would you give so much money? I end up changing my attorneys to Gunderson because I needed to have someone that really understood the startup space, that were really educated. So when I got term sheets and things, they knew the right thing to do at the right time. And so it's been a really interesting piece of the journey, but it's been enlightening. I take all of this stuff as growth. So I don't look at it as a negative experience. I think it's something that's making me stronger. And to be here for 5 years and the company doing well, that's a testament of the people that are around us. And so COI stands for Circle of Influence. So we really believe in whoever we put around us is really helping set the stage for us to really leapfrog forward. And so that's really important. So the one last thing I want to say, what I decided to do even before I started CLI Energy, is to have a women-led conference just to really educate women about the things that I learned. So it started off with the corporate, because I started that conference 8 years ago, and my company's only 5. So it was really for women that were looking at moving up to the C-suite. So it was kind of giving them things on just how do you elevate and bring in keynote speakers. And then when I started CLI Energy 4 years ago, I started focusing on just female founders. And we do this conference every year on Martha's Vineyard, except for last year. It was the first year it was a hybrid. And it's really about me trying to give back to our communities, the folks that don't have the privilege of being exposed and having the contacts that I have. And so we've been doing it. We got some great investors that participate in everything. So just want to let you guys know that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And then whatever you learn, pay it forward and give back.
Excellent. Thanks, Lisa. And that actually leads us right into the next question. So all of you on the panel are both sort of building your own businesses and startups, as well as, really committing to developing the diversity and entrepreneurship in this ecosystem. So could the others on the panel also tell us sort of where you're focusing your efforts on solving this diversity problem in climate tech, whether it's from sort of diversity in leadership or in addressing the persistent environmental and economic inequities in climate and energy issues? And we could start with Crystal, I guess, if you want to go first.
If I can manage to unmute, yeah, I just wanted to say something that Erica said that stood out to me. I just want to call this out because this just speaks to the work that we have to do. She said, I'm finally working in a culture that's humane. I mean, what is going on now? We've been working in inhumane cultures. That is so horrific, right? So I'm putting this out to the universe right now that in, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, I'm going to just be really aggressive, really ambitious with that timeline, that no one has to say they're working in an inhumane professional environment, okay? Because that's just unacceptable for anybody of any background. So what am I doing now? Where am I focused? Specific to upstate New York, the work that we're doing at Launch New York, when I thought about this question, 2 words came up. Launch New York has done an outstanding job creating a safe space for entrepreneurs of any background to think big. And that is so exciting, especially having come from the region, right? We are a Rust Belt region. Nothing good comes out of Buffalo, okay? All the jokes, all the wisecracks. And so for Marnie Levine, our president and our CEO, for JP Morgan Chase, who've been huge financial sponsors and backers of the programs, for all the folks, the talented folks, all the EIRs, the board, the staff, the folks who work tirelessly at Launch to create a safe space for people in upstate and Western New York of any background. Does not matter who you are, where you come from, what your skin color is, what your economic classification is, that you can come and bring your business or your MVP and get support. Has been such an inspiration for me. So I'm just proud of the work that we've done. I'm proud of the work that we're doing every single day to make it an environment where you do not have to be self-conscious. And the whole team has gone to, great lengths to make sure that there are women and that there are people of color who can support the entrepreneurs that are coming forward with their big high growth ideas. And that's been a real focus of Launch New York over the years. There's nothing wrong with lifestyle businesses, of course, right? If you're an entrepreneur of any size, that's not to say that we sort of look down on folks who aren't thinking big. But Marnie and Launch have been very specific to focus on high growth and founders going big and believing that you can have a $10 million, a $50 million, a $100 million, $1 billion business. And the fact that you were born or live in upstate New York should not be a barrier to that. So locally, the work that we're doing at Launch has been just a great place to really prove a lot of folks wrong about how capable these folks are. They are working so hard on their business. And that's been a joy for me.
Wonderful. Well, I'll piggyback on what Crystal said there, because I really do love that leaders like Marnie Levine and like Crystal over at Launch New York are creating a whole new culture around what venture capital and investing can mean, so that it really can be something that is about supporting and advancing and mentoring entrepreneurs and helping them in their journey, rather than taking advantage of them, in the way that Shalisas' story unfortunately illustrated. And that's what we're doing at CLI Capital as well, is really kind of creating the world we want to see as women leaders, and really inventing a new whole breed of venture capital that looks at this in a different way. And that's what we're doing with the programming that we're doing in the climate tech space right now as well. So the Diversity in Climate Tech program that we're working on, and very honored to be working on with We Cornell and BET and NYSERDA, is all about creating opportunities for women and BIPOC entrepreneurs in the climate tech space, and helping surround them with mentorship, support, workshops, educational resources, but most importantly, funding, that piece of the puzzle that is often not there for so many of these overlooked and untapped and underrepresented entrepreneurs. And so we not only invest directly at CLI Capital into one or two of the companies that are in each cohort, we also surround them with other co-investors. So we curate very carefully and build relationships with a growing movement of other folks across the country who are interested in the climate tech space, who are interested in diversity and inclusion in venture capital, who are interested in really funding a new set of innovations in this space and really funding the future of this space, because I really see the work we're doing as where the future is going, and the old breed of VC is really being sort of the old school that's disappearing into the past. And so what we're doing is surrounding them with these curated other investor connections, so that each of the founders in the cohort can raise, on average, these founders raise an average of $1.5 million coming out of our previous cohorts each. And on average, they create about 9 jobs each coming out of these programs. So it's really effective. We're all about trying to drive as much capital as possible to founders as efficiently as possible, because we're also so conscious of demands on women and BIPOC entrepreneurs' time, right? So it's very different. As women founders, we are oftentimes both the CEOs of these multi-million-dollar and even multi-billion-dollar companies. We're also CEOs of our household oftentimes, right? And we're primary caregivers still, taking care of children, elderly family members, pets, you name it. And because of that, the demands on women entrepreneurs' time are so much more extreme that oftentimes the traditional accelerator model and program model just doesn't work for us. And I certainly realized that as a tech entrepreneur myself, that I couldn't, move out to Silicon Valley as a mother of 2 kids and go participate in Y Combinator for a whole summer. So instead, we designed an accelerator program with the needs of women and BIPOC entrepreneurs in mind, and created a very rapid program that is virtual, but that has a very short in-person period at the end in which people can bring their children, have childcare. We've had mothers of 5, we've had mothers with babies and mothers in tow participating in these programs. And we're so excited to bring that to the climate tech space with this program this fall in October in Ithaca, New York. So really excited to be doing that great work. And then maybe I'll turn it over to Erika to talk about some of the work we do together at NYSERDA, where we're also getting to drive environmental justice, work in disadvantaged communities, as well as work across DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion work at the government level as well. So I'm excited to be collaborating with her, and happy to turn it over to her for her take on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to like provide extra shout out for Elisa. We worked on a retreat a few years ago to invite some of our most promising startup companies to come together with founders for a couple of days. So Elisa was there, and Elisa provided childcare to a couple of the founders who we really are so impressed with, that wouldn't have been able to come without it. And this is, I think there's a lot of sort of focus or thinking around diversity recruiting. And I actually, I don't think I'm alone in this thinking, and certainly didn't invent it. But if you focus first on providing an inclusive experience, the diversity will follow. And when people feel like they really are welcome and to have a voice, and that their humanity, to Crystal's point, humanity is honored, then the diversity part's actually not that hard at all. And so Elisa is just like a master at creating inclusive experiences. So shout out to her. In terms of NYSERDA's work and my work, it kind of falls, I think, on three dimensions. So one, certainly, hopefully folks on the line have heard that, in 2019, New York State legislature, very much with the support of NYSERDA, passed the CLCPA, the Climate Act. It's a Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which set forth, nation-leading decarbonization timeline and an environmental justice imperative. And I've had the distinct opportunity to work on both our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy for the innovation portfolio, as well as the, strategic and operational approach to delivering significant energy and economic benefits to historically underserved communities. It is work that will take, if I'm just being frank, I think a lifetime, and we are in for the long haul. That being said, we feel nothing but urgency over here, both for the planet, but also for, delivering economic and environmental justice equitably. So we are hustling left and right. Hopefully I'm not sending emails at ridiculous hours of the day, but while it's a lifetime, effort, we are, burning the candle at all ends to make it happen as soon as possible. And then sort of the second dimension would be, I think, on our portfolio. So thinking about, how are we thoughtfully, deploying innovation in sensitive communities. I grew up in a disadvantaged community, and I gotta be honest, environmental justice wasn't at the top of the things that we were super worried about. I mean, it's like feeding your family and keeping the lights on and keeping your kids safe was at the top. And so so thinking about how can we give communities a voice that don't have that don't have one. Thinking about how are we, evaluating our portfolio to understand the communities that are represented among our founders, but not just our founders, also the boards, the program staff, working to build, a more equitable and inclusive experience, as I mentioned, within our tech to market programs. And, how can we help startup founders who are really, another word for a startup founder is job creator. How can we help job creators, recruit, hire, and retain diverse talent and build inclusive cultures inside growing companies? And working with, Elisa is working on this work too, but working to build peer groups within our portfolio so that they can be a support to each other, which Elisa is off doing, on her own. And then that third dimension, which I'll just share briefly, is internally at NYSERDA. How can we be sure that we are leading by example? We can't do this work authentically if we, aren't representative of the diversity of New York ourselves. And so last year, it's been underway, I think, for longer, but really last year, NYSERDA began a comprehensive effort to examine and improve our own diversity, equity, and inclusion internally, And I have been, lucky to serve on that cross-cutting executive committee to undertake that work, which is not just strategic, but I think more importantly, operational. How do we sort of thread this throughout the organization and hold ourselves to a higher standard so that, as an industry leader, we can lead by example on these measures. So I think, that's plenty of things that we're undertaking. But yeah, really excited to be doing it. I think it is the most important work.
Yeah, just really quick, because I know we're opening up for questions shortly, but with CLI Energy, our platform, we have built into our service that we provide to businesses this piece that we call KW for Good. And that KW for Good, we focus on providing marginalized communities with workforce development opportunities. I got to give a shout out to NYSERDA. I've been really utilizing their internship program, and we're, building a pipeline of underrepresented professionals through the NYSERDA program, which has been very helpful with getting people on board. And then we've been also offering full-time positions to those same interns once they completed college. So that's been great. And another piece that we do with CLI is that we provide this gifting of these clean energy solutions to these homes, where we just did an MOU recently with New York City Housing Authority, where we will provide weatherization services, solar, and energy bill assistance to people that are living in those communities. And we're doing that also nationally, just to make sure that those communities get the support they need in order to be a part of the innovation in clean energy.
Thanks, Shalisa, and everyone, actually. So our next question is, with the new administration in the White House and aggressive climate goals in New York that have already been mentioned, thanks, Erica, and obviously other states as well, what are the opportunities or challenges that arise for your programs, your startups, which are seeking to have an impact?
So I'll, as the government voice on this panel, I'll at least share that, I was saying to a colleague recently that I've been working in clean energy field since 2003, and I have never felt the tailwind that I feel now. For the first time in my career, I'm not taking audience questions on if climate change is real, and how do we know, but for once the questions are, what do we do about it? New York State is a thought leader in the climate tech space for decades, and we enjoy collaborative relationships with states at the federal level and globally. And that being said, it's obviously going to be easier to accelerate and amplify all that we're able to get done for New Yorkers, and frankly for Americans and for the planet, to have a more collaborative relationship with the federal administration. It's been obviously very exciting to join the Paris Climate Accord, rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, although New York State and many cities around the country never step back from that. We're lucky to have obviously fantastic policy expertise on our team, and we're working with them to ensure that our portfolio companies understand how best to leverage emerging guidance and funding opportunities to grow their company. We're really excited about this infrastructure bill, and I think our portfolio will certainly be first on the list to hear how best to take advantage of that new pot of money.
Thanks, Erica. Does anybody else want to add a comment to that, or should we move to the next one? Okay, so question 5 is a fun one. What advice would you give to individuals in the audience that are looking to build or join diverse teams seeking to address the climate crisis?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one, Lindsay. We've worked a lot both on recruiting teams through the various tech companies I've worked with, as well as portfolio companies as an investor, and as well as recruiting talent for our investments themselves and recruiting talented founders as well. So a few best practices that we like to keep in mind when recruiting with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind. One is really go out and invite folks to the table. Don't just wait for someone to come to you. A lot of folks take the attitude where if you have a program or an application or job opportunity available, you just say, okay, only white men applied, so, oh, well, I guess we'll just give it to another white man, right? So you got to really go out and invite people to the table and encourage them to apply. We typically do that by partnering with a lot of other diversity, equity, and inclusion focused organizations, going to where talent is in different communities and going to the different organizations, partnering with them directly, building the relationships directly, and then inviting them to apply for positions or apply for our funding opportunities at CLI Capital. We're not just waiting for someone to introduce us from their networks. I like to say, we deliberately, a lot of VCs say they only take intros from warm intros from people within their network. And that's great. Warm intros are great, but we actually very consciously go outside of all our networks. Even though our networks are also probably more diverse than most, we still go even further outside of them to find even more diversity and deliberately go and find networks that we're not tapped into already where we can recruit talent. So there's no excuse for laziness of just saying, okay, no one applied, so I guess there's no talent out there. It's just not the case. Another good thing is a good best practice is to, hire, if you're hiring for gender or racial or other kinds of diversity and inclusion, making sure you hire people in groups so that you're not just hiring one person of that category for any reason. And that can just help with building a stronger culture around it so that you're not just right away having somebody who's the only token or the only person in the room, the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room, or, the only LGBTQ member in the room, or the only disabled person in the room. So whenever possible, if you can hire groups of people together, that will really help improve the culture overall. And focus on retention and culture from day one with the hiring. So don't forget the equity and inclusion parts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So a lot of folks focus on just diversity. So that's just looking at, who's at the table, right? And who are you hiring? Who are you recruiting? But then look at equity. Are those folks being treated equally? Are they being paid equally? Do they have equal opportunities for advancement within the organization, for mentorship within the organization, to Shalisas' point earlier, all those kinds of things. And then do they feel included, right? Are they welcome at every gathering and event, or are there some events that only happen in the evenings when mothers might be putting their kids to bed and can't attend easily, for example, and can't participate in that networking opportunity, for example. Making sure that things are held at times and places that everyone can feel included and can be a part of that experience. That'll really help with retention and culture, and creating a culture that really focuses on all aspects of DEI, and then that will help with your ongoing recruitment efforts as you start to grow your team even further. But you got to start early. You got to start at the top, and you got to take a lot of these kinds of actions right from the beginning to create the culture. I'll see if anyone else wants to jump in on that too.
Sorry, I'm so slow with the mute button today. Refresh me on the question. What is it? What are we answering? What are we addressing?
So this was what advice would you give individuals looking to build or join diverse teams?
Awesome. I think we've said it. So I'm going to give a good recap here. Look right here. You guys have advocates and allies already who've been out here fighting the good fight. And now you can reach out to us. Maybe I won't volunteer everybody else. I'll volunteer myself. You can certainly reach out to us. We are active in the region. We're visible in the region. We're interested in your story and who you are and bringing you out. So you've already lucked up just by attending the event. You stumbled upon some folks that can help you. Shalisas said it's so important. Mentorship has been the key to my success. I don't know where I would be if the venture capitalists that have taken me under their arm and shown me the way in this industry had not done that. So mentorship is key. I know that's sort of easier said than done. How proactive are you being? How many events are you attending, both, online, virtually, and in in person when the world opens up. I was at every event I could possibly be at. I was talking to as many people as I could possibly talk to. And that is how I got important people to pay attention to me. So my advice, I usually tell people, identify the most accomplished person that you can around you. Ask them for advice. And then if the people around you really aren't giving you the advice that you need, then seek out other people and try to get someone to take an interest in you and to help you along the way. I cannot stress doing lots of research, finding mentorship, people who can support and guide you and be champions and allies of you, drawing from the resources that you have right here in front of you. I'm telling you, you will be on your way.
Fantastic. Do we have anybody else want to chime in on that one? And then maybe we'll move to the audience Q&A because the questions are starting to build up here. Okay. So I will start with the audience questions. To the audience, if it sounds a little different than you asked, it's because we've done some curation to not repeat. So the first question is, equity has been mentioned a lot. So the person who's asking a question works for a utility that's working to define equity in regard to energy efficiency programs. How do you define equity and how do you measure it?
I could try to take that question. So I look at equity in a way, if you're standing at a fence, I'm 5 feet tall and the next person's 7 feet tall. Someone gives me a bench, that's 2 feet, and then I'm able to stand at the same level of the fence as a 7-footer. So I define the equity that way when I look at energy. So you probably know, if you're looking at, and I don't know if you want to know it from an energy efficiency side from your customers, but if you look at marginalized communities, they are paying 3 times more for their energy than the average person nationally. And the reason why that is because they have poor infrastructure. They don't have access to, or the means, the social, the economic means to innovate, as was discussed earlier on this panel. And so if we really want to talk about equity, we have to talk about how do we bring up the third of that population up to the same level of those like us that are privileged. And so people are like, it's handouts. It's not handouts. It's that fence, and you're giving me a stepping stool to stand on because my disadvantage is because I'm short. That shouldn't be a disadvantage. Right? And the same thing with marginalized communities, because you're in a certain social economic status, that shouldn't keep you out of the conversation of having more efficient homes or apartments, and being able to be in a community where you don't have polluting power plants, which I'm excited about New York, where we're doing good in that area. But those are the things that when we think about equity, that's the lens we should look through.
Thanks, Lisa. I'll go on to the next question unless anybody else wants to comment.
I'll also just, if I briefly mention sort of, I couldn't agree more with Shalisas. The other piece that we can be thinking about here, at least as it relates to utilities, is that energy access, and during this energy transition, that solar panels and wind resource and safe and clean energy needs to be deployed to across New York equitably, not only on affordability as a percentage of income, but also on and in terms of the timeline of access. We have been engaged in discussions and conversations with historically marginalized communities, and sometimes the conversation really centers around just access to what other wealthier families have access to. And so, I think understanding the particular challenges of, tenants in multifamily buildings. And, it's not easy to just put solar on your roof, to think more sort of holistically about how to engage communities, how to listen to the needs as they describe them, and how to co-develop solutions together that meet them where they're at so that they can access affordable energy equitably on the same cadence that wealthier families can.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, the next question is, what do you see as the highest investment areas for startups looking to get into clean tech?
Can you repeat the question one more time, Lindsay? I might be able to help it.
Yeah. What do you see as the highest investment areas for startups looking to get into clean tech?
I mean, can we reframe the question? I mean, I think actually a lot of entrepreneurship is asking the right set of questions, and right. It's not, I think, about like where can we raise the most money? Like 3 years ago, if you were a blockchain startup, you could raise ridiculous money, but like where can you provide the most amount of impact? Where can you deliver value propositions that markets really need? I think that's where the venture capital will go. Venture capital is in the business of making returns for their LPs out of delivering value in ways that other people haven't figured out. And so I think the better question is, where can I deliver the most compelling value proposition? And that is where the money is.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, so we have a couple of questions on people who are sort of looking to get more into the climate tech space. One person who comes from a marketing background is looking to move into this space and has no real science background, like all you smart ladies, that's a quote. Do I need to go back to school to be considered for marketing jobs within that industry?
Yeah, I'll take this. We're all shaking our heads. Absolutely not. No, this is something that absolutely, when you have a skill like, marketing or writing or legal skills or whatever, whatever area your kind of particular skill set is in, one of the things that I've always found throughout my career is that most skills are more interchangeable than folks would think, and most things can cross over more disciplines than folks would think. There's actually a great book called Range that I recommend reading that talks a lot about that in terms of how, how folks who are generalists can kind of transfer skills across different areas. But yeah, 100% marketing skills can be applied to any industry, and it just takes a little bit of learning curve to learn the industry, sure, and to learn but essentially your marketing skills, like whether it's in graphics or design or content creation, those will all transfer over really beautifully. And in fact, I will mention that we're recruiting actively for some marketing positions at Chloe Capital, so please feel free to apply. At chloecapital.com/careers. And but there are a ton of opportunities for folks to really think about where they can apply their skills in different areas. And I also really encourage this for just to segue a little bit here, but for founders who are either technical founders wondering if they can start a business, or the reverse, a more business-oriented founder wondering if they can start something more technical, a more technical business. The answer is absolutely yes. I just want to encourage more folks to, understand that as an entrepreneur, as a leader, you may not have every single skill set, but it's all about who do you surround yourself with and being able to fill in any gaps in leadership, and also being really willing to learn new things and understand how your skills do transfer across different areas, so that if you're more business oriented and not technical, you can still use your business skills to understand the basics of the technology so that you can still operate the business. And likewise, technical and academic and research-based founders can absolutely learn what they need to know about just the basics of the business side so that they can work with a business co-founder or hire for the other team members they need. And it's one of the things we definitely train for actively in some of the programs, the entrepreneurship programs across Cornell. So I really recommend, learning more about some of the programs at the Center for Regional Economic Advancement if you're in any of those categories and want to learn more about any of those areas. I know I answered some other questions that didn't get asked, but I was inspired.
That's great, Elisa, because you actually took care of another question that was coming next about what programs are available. So thanks. And I would recommend the audience takes a look at the page where the links are popping up, because I can see our panelists sending additional information. One more question, because I need to be respectful of everybody's time. I know some of you have, some of the panelists have things, everybody has things coming up. So in regards to reducing greenhouse gases, what are your thoughts on biodiesel, renewable diesel, renewable gasoline? Right, so this idea of renewable but still combustion. Are there startups that you're familiar with that you can recommend to reach out to? And or do you believe these renewables are the future, or are we looking more at electric vehicles or some combination?
Maybe I'll take this one. So NYSERDA is I think engaged in a strategic effort and has been since the passing of the Climate Act in New York to understand what technical interventions, what types of technical innovation is needed, not just to decarbonize, because actually we can already decarbonize, but how can we decarbonize affordably and equitably? I think there's still, ongoing conversation around what technical innovation is going to make the difference. And in some ways, maybe not with regard to this set of innovations, but more broadly, we take, I think, a pretty open-minded view to what it's going to take, kind of a bit more of like an all of the above strategy, because in innovation we don't know what's actually gonna what's ultimately going to be broadly adopted. And so we have our hands in, for example, in energy storage, a number of different battery chemistries, no one can predict the future. And so what's going to ultimately be the few that are going to make the difference. And so I think we're taking a pretty open strategy. That being said, NYSERDA has been, I think, a little bit more explicit more recently that we're moving away from even the types of technologies that enable fossil fuel. And so we recognize that others are going to fund those things, and that bridge certainly is important. But NYSERDA in particular has been, I think, moving toward, less of a fossil fuel transition and going, really leapfrogging straight to decarbonizing.
And I will mention one other thing on the transportation side for folks who are interested in the transportation space. NYSERDA does have an initiative right now called the New York Clean Transportation Prizes, which is an $85 million program for clean transportation infrastructure and fleets. So there's some really exciting opportunities there. And it's nycleantransportationprizes.org if you want to learn more about that initiative as well.
Okay, thanks everyone. We're a little over time, and I appreciate the panelists, your patience and staying with us a little bit longer. So I'm going to close this out by saying thank you to all of you for your excellent answers. I know you had so much more to say, and I'm sorry that we ran out of time. And so there's contact information on this page, as we mentioned earlier, if people want to reach out to the panelists, or if you have questions that didn't get answered. Please feel free to reach out. I know all these panelists are super excited to support and engage and interact. I also want to thank, in addition to the sponsors and people that brought the panel to you, our other supporters, partners, and sponsors for today are Cornell Engineering, the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell, and the Cornell Energy Systems Institute. So thanks to those for helping us out. And finally, just to reiterate, the last slide here has some contact information for you that you can find to contact the women entrepreneurs at Cornell, the Black entrepreneurs in training, as well as diversity and climate tech. And we look forward to seeing you all at upcoming events. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for the panelists, and everybody have a great day.